In the Mount & Blade games, battles are the key feature. Unlike RTS games like Warcraft or Total War, where you command troops from the sky so to speak, Bannerlord throws you right in the thick of it, and knowing how to lead your troops and win battles is going to be essential for progressing in the game. So for part 5 of the Bannerlord for Newbies series, let's take a look at Bannerlord battles, from the basic mechanics to complex tactics, from the small skirmishes to the large-scale, full-blown battles. Before we get into it, however, quick disclaimer. You do not need to become a master tactician to win battles against a superior enemy. If tactics aren't your thing and you're just looking for an easier experience, you can simply lower the difficulty of battles by going into the camping options in the menu. Over here, you can reduce the difficulty by lowering the damage your troops receive, as well as reduce the difficulty of the AI. This will make it possible for you to win battles against all odds, and it may be good to start that way if you're not sure. But for anyone else, onward. So while Bannerlord is not realistic per se, the mechanics still rely on some realistic elements of medieval warfare, so having a basic understanding of military tactics can be beneficial here. For example, think of terrain. Depending on where the battle takes place on the world map, you may be dealing with various challenges in the environment that will affect how the battle plays out. Generally, an open flat field gives you great visibility and plenty of room to maneuver, and that's great for attacking, but it's pretty bad if you're on the defense. Finding the high ground is important when fighting defensively, as going up a slope can greatly slow down a cavalry charge, and it gives your archers optimal range on the advancing enemy. Similarly, some battles take place on paths surrounded by hillsides, which greatly limits the abilities to outflank other troops. Other battles can take place near a bridge, which can make for effective choke points and cancel out the enemy's superior numbers. So knowing how to take advantage of terrain, as well as knowing how to optimize the efficiency of your troops, is going to be crucial to winning battles. So let's start small with battles against bandits. Generally, as you start a game, you will mostly fight bandit groups. While bandits can be dangerous to your new recruits, they're not very bright. The bandits will almost always charge with little use of formations, so if you start with a warband of say 10 to 50 troops, it's a good time to start experimenting with tactics and formations. I mentioned in the previous video that you should always fight from horseback, so right off the bat, the best way to defeat bandits when outnumbered is the following. Simply have your troops hold their starting position while you charge ahead, and as you attack the bandits, some will turn around to attack you, meaning fewer bandits will go against your recruits. This makes it possible to defeat pockets of bandits one at a time, until they're all dead. Think of it as a very simple divide and conquer strategy, though the proper term is probably more defeat in detail. In contrast, the first thing you learn in battles is to keep your troops together. If you order them to charge, they don't necessarily all have the same speed, and they may end up scattering around, reducing their effectiveness and making them more vulnerable. So here are the basic commands for your troops. I'm playing on PC by the way, so while console versions will have different controls, the gameplay should be the same. In battle, you can order your troops to do basically anything. They can hold a position, they can employ different battle formations, they can follow you around and charge into enemies. In every battle, your troops will start in line formation, which I'll get to in a moment. You can give these orders using the F keys at the top of the keyboard. F1 gives you deployment options, and F2 gives you formation options. So if you want to send your troops forward but keep them together, simply use F1, and you will see a group of flags icon on your mouse, representing potential troop positions. Clicking anywhere on the map will then have your troops move there, and they will advance in formation. You can also order your troops to follow you,
On my flank!
meaning wherever you are on the map, your troops will come to you. And when close to the enemy, you can order to charge.
Give 'em hell!
When you do, troops will break out of formation and seek the nearest enemies to fight. Besides moving and charging, the last command is to either hold fire or fire at will. Both commands are done with the F4 key by default.
Bowman! Hold our oats!
This is especially useful if you want your archers to preserve their ammunition until the enemy is closer, for example.
Bowman! Pick your targets!
However, infantry and cavalry can also have throwing weapons on them, and you can employ the same order on them as well. But those are the basic tactics. Now let's look at basic formations. There are several formations you can use, but let's stick to the main three: the line, the shield wall, and loose. The line formation is just that. Troops will form a few lines of battle, and it does not confer any significant bonuses, but it keeps your troops together. In line formation, troops can run, so it's pretty good for fighting against disorganized enemies, or to simply travel across the battlefield.
Form a wall!
The shield wall formation forces your troops into a tight formation. The main advantage is against archers, who will almost never break through the shields, so it's very good in a defensive manner. However, troops in shield wall advance much slower, so it's ideal to advance against a lot of archers, but you will need to break out of formation at the last minute if you hope to catch up to them. Loose formation is mostly good for archers because most of them don't have shields. Loose formation spaces them out, making them harder to hit with arrows. However, the formation is very risky against cavalry and infantry. This is where I have to say that each troop type can be commanded independently. There are 4 main troop types: infantry, ranged, cavalry, and horse archers, and they're all in separate divisions. So you could, for example, have your infantry at the front in a shield wall. Behind your infantry, you can have your archers in loose formation, and to the side, your cavalry in a line formation. Fighting using formations becomes crucial once you're past fighting bandits and are now fighting enemy lords. Unlike bandits, lords will use formations, but they will also employ one of 2 behaviors: attacker or defender. This depends on whether or not they were actively seeking you out on the world map, or if they were running away from you and you caught up. But either way, AI formations tend to be the same regardless of the faction. They will typically have a line of archers with infantry close behind, and 2 groups of cavalry to either side. If they are defenders, they will simply hold this position and wait for you to attack. If they are attackers, they will slowly march up to you, and the tactics from there depends on the distribution of troops. If they have a lot of archers, they will essentially form a line and shoot at your troops until they run out of arrows, at which point the entire enemy army will charge. If they have a lot of infantry, they will slowly march all the way to your formation and charge at the last moment. And if they have a lot of cavalry, they will charge all of them straight at your centered, followed by the rest of the army. Horse archers are generally few and will run independently from the rest of the army. They will go in circles against your warband while shooting arrows. Because there's so few of them, they're mostly just a distraction. Unless it's the Kuzite or the Asare, who tend to have a bigger distribution. So generally, my recommendation is to have the same basic formation: infantry in the center, archers in the back. If possible, have cavalry on both sides to protect the flanks. If fighting defensively, always look for the top of a hill, as height gives you a great defense bonus. But a big difference when fighting lords, or just having bigger battles in general, is that you'll get the option to pre-deploy your troops, which is also very important. If you played Total War before, this is very similar. Every time you start a new battle, you have a bit of space to deploy your troops however you like. And there's a lot of options here, so let's break it down. As said before, troops are divided by types and into divisions, so by default you have 3 divisions, 4 if you have horse archers. However, you can add more divisions by clicking the plus icon and selecting a troop type. This is pretty important to divide your cavalry into 2 separate divisions, one for each flank. You can then use the scroll bar option to decide how to split your troops, whether you want an equal distribution or not. You can also appoint characters for each division, either as heroes or commanders. So if you have any companions in your party, you can appoint them. As heroes, you still have full control of the division, but companions can be equipped with various banners that give passive perks to the division you put under their command. So there's that. I don't recommend appointing characters as leaders of divisions, as the AI isn't that good. You can also select formations for your troops right away, as well as place them anywhere within the deployment zone. But most importantly, you can choose which troop type to prioritize. So if, for example, you know the enemy has a lot of cavalry, you can prioritize infantry with polearms that will be more effective against cavalry. If you know the enemy troops are mostly elite, you can prioritize your army to field your elite troops for yourself. So pre-deployment can be critical in winning battles. So as you get used to deployments, giving orders in battle and such, let's talk about the biggest battles you can possibly have in the game. So as kingdoms go to war, you won't just be facing individual lords. Kingdoms will form armies, which is when lords merge their warbands together. These armies will often have hundreds of troops, often over 1,000. To be clear, you should never fight armies in the field unless you are in an army of your own. But when it does happen, there are 2 main differences when it comes to battles with armies: limited leadership and reinforcement waves. So in an army, the leader is whoever formed the army. If you're joining this army, you will not have full control of the army in battle, unless you're the faction leader. Instead, you will have the choice to lead one division of your choice. As you fight, it's important to coordinate your division with that of other lords. But if you are the army leader and retain full command, the one thing you need to keep an eye out for is reinforcement waves. Because battles between armies are much larger, you will never deploy all of your troops right away, unless I suppose you have a very powerful PC and can afford to tweak the settings, but for everyone else, you will basically start with a fraction of your army, and as the battle goes on and both sides lose men, you will get reinforcement waves from the edges of the map, and they will keep coming until either side is either wounded, dead, or ran away. It is possible for either side to rout if the battle seems to obviously go in one's favor, but that's pretty rare. So the one thing to keep in mind about reinforcements is that they can take time to reach the fight, meaning either side could choose to fall back to let reinforcements catch up before resuming the battle. Typically, if the enemy falls back to reach reinforcements, there will be a brief period where they are out of formation and very vulnerable, but careful to chase them too far, for if they do reach reinforcements and your army is strung out, it can reverse the battle. In that sense, an army that fights defensively will always receive reinforcements faster, which makes it difficult for the attacker to maintain the onslaught. All of this makes it fairly common for large battles to get into a pause, as each side waits for fresh troops, reorganizes their formations, and gets back to fighting. But anyway, that's basically it. Regardless of the scale of battle, the same three formations are typically the safest to use. Get used to giving orders, and remember to lower the difficulty if it's still too hard. Obviously there are many more complexities to the battles, as well as many formations or tricks I did not cover, but this video is getting pretty long as it is, so join me next time as I share my personal tips for battles in Bannerlord. If you have any questions or things you'd like to add, feel free to tell me in the comments. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.